Hey everyone, welcome to Multifamily Modeling. In this video, we're going to take a quick tour of our annual apartment acquisition model, specifically version 2.01. And in the process, we'll focus on a few of the more unique features of this model. To start, the Intro tab features a formatting legend to get you comfortable with the differences between fonts throughout the model. Also, the blue tabs are where your inputs are located, and the green tabs are where your outputs are located. Next up is the Summary tab, and this is a recap of the entire deal in one place. This tab summarizes the sources and uses of funds, over here, the sale proceeds, project level returns, and equity returns to each of the partners. Next, the rent roll summary gives you a brief overview of unit renovations throughout the project, and of course the rent roll itself. Finally, the Pro Forma summary at the bottom is a simplified version of the annual Pro Forma, and the Cash Flows by Equity Partners section outlines the results of the Waterfall tab. The Assumptions tab is where the majority of your inputs are located. It allows you to model base case, upside case, and downside case scenarios, while changing the scenarios by using this drop-down list up in cell E10. And here are where each of the cases are located, and inputs for each. The Assumptions tab is where you'll find all of your annual growth rates, your unit renovation schedules, your financing assumptions, and your tax revaluation analysis. This is for when your municipality reevaluates taxes at some point post-acquisition. This model also allows you to model lender reimbursements for capital expenditures, which are often outlined in your loan documents. And at the bottom, there are two sensitivity tables. The Rent Roll tab allows you to change the number of units with the click of a button. To add units, click the Add Rows button and type the number of units you'd like to add, and the same goes for removing units. So let's test this out. The model starts with 40 units inputted, so let's say we want to add another 40 units. We have an 80 unit acquisition deal we want to model, so we would click Add Rows, we would type 40, press Enter, and the model expands down to a total of 80 units. And you can copy and paste these cells down. These are just inputs. The formulas are copied down when you input the new amount of units, but these are also copied down as well. So you can use the drop-down list to select the unit type, or you can just copy and paste this all the way down, and you have 80 units. Now let's say we wanted to go back to 40. We would press Delete Rows, type 40, Enter. We're back to 40 units. So hopefully that'll save you a lot of time in modeling your deals. The Capex Budget tab follows the rent roll, and it's a pretty straightforward tab. This tab feeds into the rest of the model, and it's where you'll input your general capital expenditure budget right up here, along with the per unit renovation budget right down here. And again, these numbers, the total general renovations and the total price per unit as far as renovation costs per unit go, those feed back into the Assumptions tab. Up here is where capital improvements feeds to, and then cost per unit renovation feeds to here, and that's where the cumulative renovation costs are calculated off of. You could always zero these out if you'd like to and input your own numbers. The Sales Comps tab is where you'll add your comps. You can copy and paste this tab into your investor pitch book if you'd like. This is a pretty straightforward tab where you're just inputting all your values down here for the comparable properties, and your subject property inputs are pulled from the rest of the model up here. Next up is the Trailing 12 Statement tab, which is where things get interesting. So this tab allows you to copy and paste the seller's trailing 12 income and expense numbers, or the broker's numbers, and map them to the rest of the model using the drop-down lists on the right. The numbers from this tab map to the Income and Expense tab, which is the next tab we'll go over. But let's take a quick peek at how this works. So you're going to copy and paste the seller's, let's say, trailing 12 numbers, starting in the top left, and you'll have your line item, income and expenses, and then 12 months of income and expenses. The model, starting in these blue columns, will sum up your trailing 12 numbers, your annualized trailing 6 numbers, and your annualized trailing 3 numbers. You can then choose what categories you want these allocated to: market rent, loss to lease, vacancy, concessions, other income, and then all of your expenses as well. So let's say this was a tax expense. You would select taxes, and then what do you want to specifically map it to? You would say, okay, real estate taxes, other taxes, franchise tax, tax bills, fees, and choose. Let's say real estate taxes. And then this will now map as real estate taxes into the rest of the model. So let's just change this back because this is other income, and we'll leave it at that and now go into the income and expense tab. In the income and expense tab, you'll see the full categorized results from the trailing 12 statement, and you'll input your own numbers to be used in the annual Pro Forma tab. That's the in-place annualized column over here where you see the blue input cells. These will be your inputs, and these will be pulled to the annual Pro Forma tab. Or if you just want to use the seller's trailing 12 actuals, you can, let's say, set this cell equal to the seller's trailing 12 actuals, and those will pull to the rest of the model. Or let's say this is too much detail for you. You can minimize these groups, and then you can just input the sum of each of these groups or categories. So what are your total utilities? You can skip the line, so to speak, and enter that here. And these all feed into the annual Pro Forma tab. The annual Pro Forma itself is straightforward and is the result of all of your inputs thus far. Revenues are calculated using the rent roll, growth trends, and unit renovation inputs. And expenses, down here, are calculated using your inputs from the income and expense tab, which were mapped from the trailing 12 tab. The expenses can also be expanded or minimized, just like in the previous tabs. So you'll see your full detailed report here, if you'd like, just to check on everything, or you can go back and minimize just to simplify things. Below you'll have line items for percent of total revenue for your total operating expenses, and expenses per unit, just a quick check to see what's going on. This model also lets you fund repairs with equity or with cash flow, and you can size your debt via loan to value or loan to cost. Finally, down below, there's a brief summary of the returns for the project. Up here, which we just skipped over, this is the funding of the equity to cover all of your repairs and capital expenditures. And this is fed into this portion from the Assumptions tab. The Sensitivity Analysis tab calculates the IRR over here and NPV over here for each of the 10 possible hold periods, so for each of the 10 years. You can use this tab to determine your ideal hold period and your ideal business plan. Here's a look at the Waterfall tab, which has a 3-tier IRR-based waterfall. Returns are calculated on a deal level basis and cross-checked, then distributed by partner. So here's tier 1, 9% accrual with a 9% IRR check just to validate it. Same thing for tier 2. And then tier 3 are all cash flows above that. Also, in this model, the sponsor's promote is broken out separately to determine how much of the sponsor's profits are a result of the promote itself. Next, the financing tab is where debt calculations are located. And these loan assumptions up top are populated from your assumptions earlier in the model. And you have an option for interest-only periods, different terms, amortization, and of course LTV, interest rate, etc. And finally, the OpX Data Tab is where you'll find all the inputs for the trailing 12 statements mapping functions. You can add additional inputs if you so choose, up to 25 inputs for each header. And that's all. So thanks for taking the tour, and let us know if you have any questions.